Hi everyone, my name is Leah. My channel is Common Sense Ethics. Welcome. My guest today is Winton Bates. Hi Winton.
Hi, Leah.
Yeah, and I've known Winton for a long time now. He's a blogger friend of mine for many years, and I'm happy to have him on today. Yeah, and go on.
I'm happy to be here, Leah.
Good, very good. I'm glad to have you. And just a quick reminder before we get started that to subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon so that you get notifications when I post new content. So Winton, why don't we jump right in? Why don't you tell us the name of your website and a little bit about you and your background?
Okay. Well, my website is Freedom and Flourishing. I've been had this blog for about 12 years. My aim when I started off the blog was to explore the links between freedom and happiness.
Yeah.
And I was particularly interested in happiness research at that stage.
Yeah.
So as my understanding of the nature of human flourishing has improved, I've focused more on the implication of flourishing as a self-directed process.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very good. And go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So a bit of background about myself, perhaps. Yeah. I'm an Australian, of course. Studied economics at university in the 1960s. My work career then was mainly about advising governments and business organisations on issues relating to economic development, international trade, productivity growth, technological progress, that sort of thing.
Yeah, very good. And we're going to be talking about your new book today and the subject matter therein. So why don't you tell us about it and when it's coming out?
Okay, my book is entitled Freedom, Progress and Human Flourishing. It's due to come out in May. We'll see just what happens there. And so this book draws on my work experience to some extent, and it also reflects the broader interests that I've developed over the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
I suppose most immediately the book stems from the blogging activity that I've just described.
Yeah, no, that's great. Congratulations on it. So, yeah,
Thank you.
And I've had the pleasure of reading it, so I can recommend it. But yeah, and anyway, so you mentioned that you had a career in economics, and since you spent most of your career working on issues relating to economic development, in order to write a book named Freedom, Progress, and Human Flourishing, you must have had to sort of think more broadly at some point. How did that transition come about?
Yeah, well, maybe I can start off. I've had a long-standing interest in freedom. So I right from when I was at university or before, I was reading stuff like J.S. Mill's Essay on Liberty, just out of interest. So I maintained that interest over years. And the progress stuff stems from my interest in economics.
Yeah.
It's really over the last 30 years that I started thinking broadly about human flourishing. And there are two aspects to that. One is a personal development aspect. I have some needs for some personal development, personal problems. I read a lot of self-help literature over the time, and got interested in what lay behind it, and so on. Now, the second aspect is the professional one. I was working in the New Zealand Treasury, and they'd been through a program of fairly serious economic reform. Mm-hmm. But the government over there, just when I arrived, they decided that we've got to think more about social cohesion. So why don't we get Winton to write something on social cohesion? And I was completely out of my depth. So my contribution there was fairly modest, but it did spark my interest in the broader issues of human flourishing.
Yeah, well, very interesting. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, so one of the themes in your book is, as you've mentioned, sort of the importance of self-direction to individual flourishing. And so how would you define self-direction first? And also, why do you see it as so important?
Yeah, well, self-direction means choosing to direct your energies at goals that you've chosen, and being able to move towards those goals. So, in practical terms, it means accepting responsibility for managing your own life, rather than to have other people accept that responsibility on your behalf. So I see self-direction as important because it's it's integral to the nature of human flourishing. That and individual flourishing is about realization of potential.
Yeah.
That adult humans have the potential to exercise the practical wisdom and integrity required to direct their own flourishing. To choose their values and goals, so if you have the potential to do it and it's a good thing to do, then
yeah. Now, it's sort of implied here, but how would you define flourishing? What does that mean exactly? Does that mean just living a good life, or how so?
It is living a good life. It's about virtues, the idea of it's achieving the basic goods. So one of the basic goods is self-direction. The ability for wise and well-informed self-direction, and living long and healthy lives. Managing your relationships with other people, managing staying reasonably happy, and also living in harmony with nature.
That's good.
There's also those things.
That's right. Yeah. Now that you're mentioning that, now I remember specifically reading all of those. So you touched a little bit on virtue, and we're going to continue talking about the topic of natural rights in the following question. But so what would you say that the relationship between sort of virtue and natural rights and flourishing is? Are they all necessary for a good life?
Yeah, I think human flourishing is living the good life. And as you know, I get most of my inspiration from Aristotle, or much of it, and he saw the good life as a life of virtuous activity.
Right.
And virtue is not just about doing the right thing, but it's about taking pleasure in doing it.
Right.
There's a modern tendency to view virtue as only relating to relations with other people, and I think that's a bit unfortunate. There's virtue in making wise choices for your own health and well-being. And so. The link to natural rights. I think it's two aspects of that. One is in order to flourish, you need to act with integrity towards other people.
Yeah.
And at the minimum, really, that means respecting their life and their property and so on, their natural rights. I think the second aspect is that we need a social and political order that protects natural rights. Because that allows individuals the maximum scope to choose how they flourish without interfering with the flourishing of other people.
Right. Very good. And so let's delve a little bit more into that. So in your book, the discussion about sort of the evolution of ideas about freedom implies that it's basically the result of a series of happy chances that people who live in the West, in liberal democracies, have as much freedom as they do today. So what was the series of happy chances that sort of led to Western liberal democracy?
Okay, I'll have to be fairly brief, but I'll...
Yeah.
So that the people who were lucky enough to be the citizens in ancient Athens and Rome had a fair few freedoms. You know, their rights to life, liberty, and property were protected to a fair degree. If you didn't have, even if you didn't have citizenship right, but there was some protection there to own property and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we get the fall of Rome, and what some people call the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
These were the Middle Ages. There was some of the law, the common, what we now call common law,
right,
was maintained. The Roman law was maintained in civil law to some extent in Western Europe, and theologians in the church made some important contributions to recognising the unique value of the human individual. So, you got recognition of freedom of conscience.
Yeah.
That didn't stop didn't stop many lives being lost in an effort to save souls. But it did move eventually towards recognition of the rights of people to exercise freedom of religion.
Yeah.
There's important stuff there. St. Thomas Aquinas, I think, in the recognising the difference between sin and things that should be made unlawful. So that's something that's still not completely recognised. That's that might take us to John Locke. There's a happy chance there that his writings being able to be published.
Yeah.
1689. The English, the British Parliament had deposed James II and put William and Mary on the throne. Yeah. So there was an opportunity there to publish his writings. And then, you can fast forward to the last century. I think Western liberal democracy has been shown to be somewhat fragile. It could have been more or less wiped from the face of the earth 80 years ago if the outcome of the Second World War had been different.
Yeah. And so, what do you think are the future implications of that?
Well, it's just that that I think we've got to be a bit careful that we don't give away our freedoms, because we may not be lucky enough to get them back again. The area I think we need to be particularly careful about is free speech.
Yeah,
I think that is really at the heart of what we need to hang on to.
I have a sense of foreboding about that as well. I think a lot of people do, and because people sort of, tend to take things for granted. That this is how it'll always be. This is how things will always be. I don't know if it's sort of a normalcy bias or something like that, or just a tendency to dismiss people who are calling to protect natural rights like free speech as alarmist or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, certainly. Well, we hear all the time about what's happening in other countries, but we don't really see it could happen to us.
Yeah, it's probably complex to to figure out why that's the case at this moment in history. But so okay, so let's turn to progress. What do you present your own definition of progress?
Yeah. Okay, so I look back in history at the last 200. Well, it's before that. It's 300 or 400 years, and there was a change in culture in Western Europe. It became more accepting of experimentation, innovation, entrepreneurship, and so that there's a fair bit of discussion of that in the book. And then just over the last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, there's been periods in history where there have been waves of technological innovation in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
But the thing about what's happened in Western Europe and the US and Australia and other countries like that is that this has been sustained now for a couple hundred years. And it's, so there's been a culture there of being willing to accept that your life might be disrupted by innovation, but there is a prospect that you will still have a happy life, and that next following generations will even have better opportunities. So it's just some people call it the bourgeois deal. But you'll accept some opportunity, some possibility that your life might be disrupted. But the deal says, that everyone will nearly everyone's chances will improve.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so you seem to think that progress may be interrupted in the years ahead by major economic crises. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I'm fairly pessimistic about the next decade or so for all the Western liberal democracies, really. There's been a decline in the rate of productivity growth over the last few decades, that's leading to lower income growth, but also to lower growth in government revenue. Now, that's at a time when the demands being made on government are increasing, partly associated with the ageing of population.
Okay.
What I mean is that obviously a higher proportion of elderly people in the population who want governments to help pay for their retirement incomes and healthcare and so on. And governments don't seem to be able to cope with this, and you're seeing higher debt levels.
Yeah.
The obvious solutions are to introduce economic reforms to try to promote higher productivity growth, back to more economic freedom, and also to contain government spending. Interest-driven politics make that difficult. I just can't. I don't see a way to avoid a crisis.
Do you think that monetary policy has anything to do with it?
It's playing a minor role. It'll partly there is a bit of a risk that I see now, I was going back into something like the 1970s, where we've got
stagflation.
Right. Yeah, stagflation. So so you've got higher the amount of money being pumped into the system.
Right.
You'll end up with a situation possibly of too much money chasing too few goods. The governments, the central banks trying to contain inflation, and that resulting in higher unemployment.
But you said that you're more optimistic over the long term about the prospects for sort of ongoing progress and flourishing. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I think that a crisis does tend to focus minds, and if it's there's a bit of history in the longer established liberal democracies to react well to crises. Even just going back into the 1970s and 80s, the governments did eventually respond in ways that enabled longer term growth to be restored, and that the movement of monetary policy out of politics is part of that explanation. So no, you can't really move fiscal policy completely out of politics, but I think you can that politicians can accept rules that will constrain their behaviour.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, your book moves between discussing the context of human flourishing, right, which you define as sort of opportunities that progress provides people with, and also sort of that the contrast of that with the challenges that people tend to face in their lives. And so how would you respond to those who say that with all the progress that has occurred within both psychology and economics, that government should now be doing more to help individuals to manage their lives?
Yeah. Part of my response to that is that the information that is being generated by happiness research and behavioural economics is out there, that it's available to individuals to use themselves. So you see a fair bit about that in the media and in self-help literature and so forth. That's been has been transmitted, and some of it is fairly irreliable. It's all open to discussion and criticism. And perhaps there's even a role for some. If you have government departments, maybe they can talk about the reliability of some of this stuff. But the idea that because they have this information, that they should be able to manage our lives is a real problem. They don't know what our values and aspirations are as individuals. They don't really have any good reasons to act in our interests. I mean, in voting for them, we aren't really voting for people who are going to be sort of wise father figures to manage our lives. If you want someone to manage your life, you talk to your relatives or someone to help.
Well, in the United States, I think it's not. I don't know that there are government agencies devoted to sort of happiness research or promoting happiness. I know there are things like that in the UK, and maybe there are in your country as well. But in the United States, people tend to think that basically if we support people economically, that happiness will follow from that. What do you think about that hypothesis? I remember you touched on that in the book, that that you thought that wealth, to a large extent, or greater opportunities at least to earn more money, does actually improve people's happiness to an extent. What do you think?
Certainly. I mean, I think that people are capable of managing their own lives, and if you really want to help people, then make well, if there are people in need of help, then give them some of the resources they need, and they will help themselves. Actually, in the United States, in the Obama administration, the nudge guy.
Nudge guy. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
I'm not sure if it was Sunstein or the people who have been promoting the idea of what they call it, libertarian paternalism. They were getting involved in some government programs. So that the influence is there has been some influence in the US. I guess it disappeared.
It disappeared. Yeah, Obama, that's starting to be a long time ago. I'm drawing a complete blank on that. So I don't know. But all right. Well, speaking of sort of opportunities and meeting basic needs, you think that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you mentioned that is still central to contemporary thinking about personal development. So why don't you explain what Maslow's hierarchy is and how it relates to sort of both personal development and virtue?
Okay, so Maslow wrote an article in 1943, Abraham Maslow, and his hypothesis is that humans are motivated by a hierarchy of needs that they seek to satisfy in a particular order. So at the base, he had physiological needs, safety, love, esteem, and then self-actualization. Now, over the years since then, there's been a great deal of discussion about the order in which people might seek to meet those needs. So there's some point being made that, people are prepared to lay down their life for a cause, for example, so that presumably has something to do with self-esteem, and maybe that comes before the need to stay alive. So, but overall, there's been some agreement that people do need to meet their deficiency needs before they can go on. Even as Aristotle said that we can. We need virtue, but we also need we also need food and shelter.
Right.
Okay, so fellow Scott Barry Kaufman, I'm not sure about the pronunciation of his name. He's a modern follower of Maslow. He's simplified the model to distinction between deficiency needs and self-actualization or development needs.
Right.
And so he argues that the drive for exploration is to seek out and make sense of novel, challenging events is at the core motive for self-actualization. He also talks about love and purpose, very important. So actually Maslow thought that people would naturally move.
Right.
Once you'd satisfied your basic needs, you would naturally move on.
Right.
to satisfy self-actualization needs. But that obviously doesn't always happen. People people do tend to get stuck on eating more than they should and whatever. So
yeah, that's good because everybody needs a philosophy of life to flourish, right? I would think so. Because if you can't identify what your highest goals are, how are you gonna flourish beyond, just sort of satisfying your basic needs? Is that would you agree? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Doing very well.
I'm tired. Like I said, it's nighttime here. So, all right. So, let's see. Yeah. So, when you talk your chapter about sort of the evolving context of human flourishing, right? It contains an optimistic discussion about the future of technology, but you end up suggesting that to fully flourish, we sort of need to transcend utilitarian concerns, which is kind of what we were just talking about, and to contemplate what human nature requires of us as individuals. So we've already touched on this a little, but what types of things would that be?
Yeah, I think I need to emphasise that it is a matter of self-direction, that we need to choose for ourselves. If there is a general point, I think it's about the seeking of wisdom, and that's not something that we can sort of just leave to specialists. So, we all have different interests, so that
right, yeah.
If you're interested in sport and watching sport, well, you can seek a bit of wisdom about that, or music, or and other things. No, so I mean, I was speaking personally as someone who spent his life thinking about economics. I think I should probably be thinking more about the nature of truth, beauty, and goodness. So, and reading more poetry.
That's good to be more well-rounded then.
It's I think it's a good way to end up anyhow. in my life.
That's funny. Yeah. So one of the messages in your book is that those of us that live in sort of the Western liberal democracies should count our blessings. Why do you feel that to be the case?
Yeah. Well, the first aspect of that is that we have a lot of blessings to count, I think.
Yeah.
We would crave the opportunities that most of us in the Western liberal democracies have. We would, if we lived elsewhere in the world, we would actually crave to take those sorts of opportunities. And the second part, the Stoic part, I suppose, that we can obtain greater inner freedom by feeling gratitude for what we have.
Yep.
So that if we go through life feeling that we deserve better outcomes than life dishes out to us, that's not particularly helpful. If you think of the resources that you actually have, and you feel grateful that you have those resources, then that does help us to reframe situations, to help ourselves to find solutions.
Right. No, that's good. That's fairly inspiring and optimistic. So I need more of that. I'm tending towards negativity recently, but yeah. And on that topic, okay. So do you feel that your message about the future of the West is particularly relevant during the present circumstances? Because, I mean, kind of the irony of this is that you started writing the book before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came along, and now we've basically seen the response to it really has involved sort of the greatest restrictions on individual liberty that I've seen in my lifetime, and I would assume that you have as well. So, what reasons do we have to be optimistic?
Okay, that's a good question. I think the first thing about is that the pandemic is the responses are interesting. I can speak about my country. There's been fairly widespread support for some restrictions on liberty here in response to the pandemic. So most people have been willing to change their norms of behaviour, and so many would have taken action to enforce social distancing, even if the government didn't act, tell people to stay away. So I think it's here. When this time last year, people of my age anyhow were deciding, no, we have to limit our social interactions, and so businesses started to voluntarily shut down or only open certain days. So governments were actually following this lead, and there was fairly widespread support for government restrictions, and people sort of argue that the lockdowns have given us more freedom than we would otherwise have had. Now, we'll be arguing about that for many, many years to come. I think I really think that some parts of this country, the lockdowns have been far too severe.
Right.
But I do have to acknowledge that we have had that now we're enjoying more freedom, even though we haven't got a substantial vaccination rollout. Life is more or less back to normal, unless you want to go overseas.
Right.
Okay. My reason for optimism about that there are people who are going to want to hold on to these restrictions. There are people saying, "Oh, we've got to stop shaking hands and all that sort of stuff into the future." Well, wear masks on public transport. I don't think people will put up with it once the reason for the restrictions is gone. Example, I went on a bus one day last week.
Yeah.
Big sign up, that you should be wearing a mask.
Yeah.
No one on the bus was wearing a mask. So that's that reflects the situation here.
Yeah. I would say that people would probably be wearing them here. So people are wearing them here on buses.
Some people are wearing them.
I would say people will probably be wearing them here on public transportation.
Yeah. So I noticed when I was watching the golf, the Masters, the spectators all had their masks on. They're out in the open, nice sunny day. Right. But just the state of the situation there.
Right.
But I suppose my bottom line is that once death rates fall, serious illness rates fall, people aren't going to allow themselves to be pushed around for no reason. So there's people are prepared to endure a lot I restrictions on their liberty if they think they're getting something out of it. But, I don't think people will allow themselves to be pushed around to these shutdowns and that sort of stuff.
Good. I hope that you're right.
So do I. It'd be dreadful if I'm wrong. I'll have to take to the streets.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the last year has just been surreal, so but so that's good, Winton. So I hope that we will end on a high note here, a message of optimism. So about the future, and so what your book again is? Let's see, Freedom, Progress, and Human Flourishing, and it's due out in May, right?
That's correct, yes.
Excellent, yeah.
The front cover could look a bit like that.
Oh, I can't see it. Move it into the center more.
You can't see it? Okay.
Move it closer to the center.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. You've got your proof there. Very good. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and it's been an interesting discussion. And I hope that you have a lot of sales with your book publication.
Well, thank you, Leah, for the interview. I hope some of what I said made sense.
Yes.
And you'll have to keep talking on our blogs.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Thanks so much. All right, take care.